Got my phones on. I'm ready to go here. Going to talk about the gods tonight. Something come up and it just seemed like an appropriate thing. And there's a story I have about Thor, and especially the god Thor. This is pretty funny. This happened about over 30 years ago. And my friends and I were headed upstate, and for some reason we stopped in a gin mill along the way when we, had never been there before. And as we went in, it was afternoon, nice sunny day. The guys in there were all having this great conversation going. They were talking about Vikings, and they got talking about Thor. And they're talking about the hammer and the red beard and the lightning, and they were really elevated. It really was an upbeat place. They were having a great time talking, and we were just about to chime into the conversation. Everyone was just having so much fun talking about Thor, and the myths and everything. And one of those rare intellectual moments you find in a gin mill. And we're just about to chime in, and some little wimpy guy at the end of the bar says, yes, well, but remember, he's not a real God. Jesus is God, and the Bible's the best book. And all of a sudden, it was like someone stuck a pin in a balloon, and it just deflated. The whole room died. Oh, yeah, okay, yes, that's true, they were saying. And just took the life out of the room. And it reminds me of something that had happened years ago. A fella I knew worked as a cook, and some of the guys they had as helpers in the kitchen were Haitian. And he, was reading up on some of the beliefs there. He's Wiccan, and had, been talking to him about Shango, which is one of their deities. It's their thunder god. And they started dancing and all, and they told him something kind of along the same lines. They said, Shango is happy, Jesus is sad. Because with Thor, you don't think cheap and small. You think big, you think large, you think grand, and you think quality. Not just a lot of stuff, but great stuff, You don't think of Thor as being cheap, just stinting. That's not Thor. Thor's generous. There's a grandness. There's a feeling that just expands and embraces everyone. It's an amazing thing. So the opposite of, say, bitterness and sadness and that just stinting, stingy, rotten feeling. Well, Thor is the opposite of that stinting, stingy, rotten feeling. He's the antidote to it. And when you see somebody who's bitter and resentful, then they're not really in touch with Thor. They're not in touch with that Thor quality, that expansiveness. And generous. Would Thor turn people away from his table? No, he wouldn't. He doesn't get nitpicking like that. That's an analogy to use. Now, on the other side of the equation, we think of Tyr. And Tyr is a very different kind of god. Tyr is very austere, purposeful. He's basically the god of the group and the community, and he's a god of very strict justice. Because when you ask Tyr for justice, he gets them, but if you're a little in the wrong, you're going to get a little of it too. You think of the word Spartan not as the Spartans per se, but as the word Spartan. Bare bones, basic, nothing fancy, no frills. And that describes Tyr. And working with this deity over the years, I found him to be very reliable. He's very much about things being done right, especially matters of honor and stuff. And a lot of people are afraid of Tyr. And they really don't have to be. He's just a very different deity. Those who are coming out of the other religions, where it's all God is love and peace and that, aren't used to dealing with a God who's a war god, a God who is there for difficult situations. I think we can look to the past to get an idea of him too. In Norse culture during the Viking Age, the normal rule was the thing, the assembly, and the war chiefs only came up in charge in times of emergency. And that's how Tyr is. In times of emergency, in times of need, Tyr provides leadership. takes control, gives orders, and then when order is restored, recedes back to let the normal everyday processes happen. Another god that baffles and scares people is Odin. And the reason is because he seems very severe, very mysterious, very more like he's not too. He seems like he might not be too concerned with the people's safety when he is. And when you think of Tyr as the god of the community, as the military god, the leadership god, Odin is more like the politician, but he's also more the god of the individual enlightenment. He's more a grandfatherly type of figure. If you deal with him personally, he's able to tailor his way of doing things to the individuals he's working with. And sometimes it's hard because this is also a mystical god. And sometimes there are things you have to go through. And he'll make you go through them. But you'll always get, at the end of it, what you need. I had asked for all wisdom, and oh man, did I get some? I got it, but it cost. It's a heavy thing. Odin, however, is not a malicious god. He's not going to harm you. So understand, people came to these gods and trusted them, not out of fear of them, but because they knew that the gods would do them good. Other deities I've dealt with over the years, well, pretty much the whole gamut. Dealt with Njord, who is like a great uncle. He's like your rich uncle who also owns the boats down at the marina. He's a god of the coasts. Aegir and Ran are more deep undersea gods. And in matters of cooking or any kind of blending, if you can get a consciousness of them, it's a great thing. One of the things I've been blessed with is I have a knack for cooking. I don't need recipes. I can just go right in, cook, and know exactly what to do. I don't need measuring cups and all. It comes intuitive, and I can plan a meal in under 5 minutes. This is one of the things that when you have a strong connection or a healthy connection with some deities that can enhance that. Freya, of course, the love goddess, and it's an amazing thing. I like to describe her warlike side as between the time the cat hisses and the time it swats someone. Think more of a mountain lion. That split second, you get a consciousness there. Frigga is more like a big loving mama, and very protective of the young, of children, or those she cares for, and can be very comforting. There's just so much to say about all of them. But I've been asked a few times to speak about some of my experiences with the gods, and I've had some interesting ones. I've had some spiritual experiences. I don't really get into them too much because they can distract from what we need to do. You can have experiences of your own, but they don't come because you're chasing them. They come almost of themselves. Some people get so into seeking enlightenment that that's what they go to, but you're supposed to take care of your other business. It'll come when it does. The gods that we deal with are friendly gods. They're helpful gods. They're not vengeful or vindictive toward people. They're the people's gods. And that fear of God thing that you get out of the monotheistic religions shouldn't be here. You shouldn't be sitting in terror of these deities. That's not the way it is. They're much simpler, much more direct. And remember another thing too, and you got to get past this if you haven't already. Gods and goddesses are not big men and women in the sky. The ancients used these images to help symbolize them. They were like allegories, but the gods really aren't great big men and women in the sky with magical powers who go out and smack giants with hammers and chase people with spears and all that other wonderful stuff. These are spiritual beings of extremely ancient, much more intelligent, much wiser than us. and very interested in our well-being. They're very invested in the future of the universe, not just our planet, but they're interested in the future of the universe itself, of life as we know it, earthly life advancing further. So they're very interested in anything that advances and works that. And of course, the gods will work with you if you work with them. You hear people say, well, I prayed and God wasn't there. But gods don't really, they let you loose. Do what you're going to do. But when you want them, they're there. You have to make that arrangement with them. You have to get involved. Don't get caught up in the things why bad things happen to good people and all. That's not the action of the gods. That's the action of just the normal flow of life, as described in Weird. There's that forward weave and the cross weave. I've spoken of this before. The gods do what they do. They're beneficial. And that's what you need to look at. Stop being afraid of them. And one last thing I'm going to get here, and that's Loki. Because some of our heathen friends are superstitiously afraid of this god. And they shouldn't be. He gets really slammed in Ragnarok, but there's a lot of evidence that originally it wasn't Loki, it was someone else. The Christians put on a full court press to get rid of this guy. Because he's a happy god, he's a funny god, and the people, from the little we can find out, really liked him. He was a fun god. But of course he is also a trickster god, and not entirely safe. But certainly he's not the devil, he's not the enemy that some people portray him to be. You will have to deal with that aspect of things somewhere in your life. Now, whether you see these gods as personal deities out there, or maybe just an intelligent principle, or facets of something else, people have different ways of viewing them. Consider it might be none, it might be all of them, or any combination. All we know is that from experience, they're there for you if you're willing to work with them. And no great mysteries, folks. So, get to know the gods, make your deal. Don't be afraid of them. They're not the enemy. They're helpful. And they're not going to count sins or have a judgment in the future. They're there to help you. Just relax and enjoy the road. The nice thing about heathenism is there is no pressure here. Everything's natural. And so is our relationship with the gods. This is Uncle Thor. Have a good one.